Welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrand. As always, joining me in the heart of the Midwest, the one, the only, always the incomparable Dan Rubenstein. And sir, we are, I think, suffice to say, excited for this episode today. This is one of those that we kind of circle on the calendar, is it not?
It absolutely has been. We've I think we named it the Loskers.
Yeah.
The Loskers, so like the Oscars, but with that big old L in front. I pitched you on Hackademy Award, but you kind of have to do too many verbal gymnastics, too much verbal gymnastics with your mouth. So I think Loskers is the move. It's really like a year in the making, because what we do on this show, and Andy Staples is going to be here from On3.
Dr. Andy Staples. Dr. Andy Staples.
Andrew, is it Andrew? Is that the official name, Andy?
That is my government name, yes.
The government name is Andrew Staples.
Now, we're conferring, is this an honorary doctorate that's being conferred upon me? Because, see, I live with someone who works in medicine who laughs at people who have PhDs who go by doctor, because she works with a bunch of people who went to college for like 94 years before they could actually make any real money.
Right.
And they get called doctor. So
I think this is like the Dr. Duncanstein kind of award, or like Dr. Demento, I think, where we
yes, great doctor, launched Weird Al Yankovic.
Yes.
I mean, who wouldn't love Doctor? But yes, the Loskers is a great name.
Thank you.
It has a great ring to it. Hackademy Awards is trying a little too hard, I think.
agree.
But yeah, the question is, what's the trophy look like? Because isn't Oscar basically holding a shovel?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, there is some sort of I don't know, implement. There's some sort of tool that the Oscar is holding, right? Ty, you can pull up the image. But yeah, we're calling you, though, our wrongcologist.
Okay, I
Board
like that.
certified Dr. Andrew Staples, wrongcologist.
Board
Yes.
certified. Okay. And to be absolutely clear, we're not honoring the biggest losers in the sport this year. We're not going to like point out a team that got destroyed over and over again. We are going to turn it on the camera, the microphone on ourselves, and honor the takes, the game predictions, the game picks, the season predictions, whatever, that we could not have been more incorrect about. And why not have Andy Staples, our wrongcologist, into
very famously wrong a lot of times this past season.
You had a moment this year,
wrong.
Andy. You had a moment this year that may win the ultimate Oscar.
Yes.
Yeah. Outstanding performance in the field of wrongness. Yeah.
Yes. What is the best picture Losker? Like, what are we calling that?
Crash, I guess, right? Well,
Yes.
it's the crash of the season.
Which, by the way, does not hold up.
Not especially well. No, not at all. Okay. So the format here is, I don't know if it's not a draft, it's not a bracket. We're going to create an open, friendly space to admit that we were wrong about a number of items, games, feelings, vibes, whatever, that we had going back to last offseason. Because here's the challenge of doing what we do, by the way, poor us, of course, is we look at transfers, we look at coach hires, we look at realignment, and we say, this is how we feel. And you got to plant a flag kind of early on in the offseason. You're like, this is how I feel about Wisconsin. This is how I feel about Florida State. And you can't really waver on it unless there's like a very clear reason to waver on it. Like, you got to kind of plant your flag. And so if you're right, you can say, hey, I had this. And if you're wrong, you're like, well, I flubbed that. And so this is really a long time coming. And I know you, Andy, had at least a week or multiple weeks where you're just like, did not evaluate week 3 correctly. Ty had some stuff in the offseason. I definitely had some stuff in the offseason and during the season. So I don't know. Without further ado, I think we turn to Andy first. Ty, what do you think?
We could do. Why don't we start on a good note, though?
Let's start positive.
Let's start positive, because
what positive can there be from this?
no, there could be a few things that are positive from this, because they weren't all wrong. They weren't
That's
all
true.
wrong. Like, for me, for
True.
example, I'll continue patting myself on the back, much to the chagrin of Michigan people, that I did, in fact, have Michigan winning the national championship when I did the Big Ten preview back in June or July. whenever the hell we did it.
But hold on. There's a full story here.
Okay.
Because this might be Ty's able to pat himself on the back, but this also might be a nominee, a Losker nominee, because Ty picked against Michigan in the Rose Bowl. He turned his back. He said preseason, he was like, Michigan's my national champion. Michigan's my national champion. Throughout the season, Michigan over Nebraska, Michigan over Minnesota. Michigan's my national champion. Michigan's my national champion. And then the siren song of the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Lurleen Lumpkin of the college football season. Actually, that kind of works well, right? Marge, kind of maize and blue, turning your back on Marge Simpson. And
the Southerner, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And Ty's got like the smokestacks there in the Lehigh Valley, very Springfield-esque. And he could not have been more wrong because of how right he initially was.
I blinked in a moment of weakness. So this is sort of both sides of the coin for me.
I did that in the 2021 season when I picked Georgia over Alabama in the SEC championship game, was hilariously wrong, and had been picking Georgia all season to win the national title, picked Alabama to win the national title game, and of course, Georgia wins.
Yep. And look, it's, to be fair to us, to those of us who do this job, it's arguably never been more difficult because of player movement, coach movement, and the various variables, whatever, that are now coming with this sport. And so it is difficult because you can talk yourself into teams more easily. Be like, look, they added, 15 transfers, or this new coach did this at this place. Like, we have more information, we have more data points than ever before, but it can be, paralysis by overanalysis. And so Ty talked himself into Alabama. In retrospect, Ty, do you stand by the pick?
I stand. Listen, and a lot of Michigan people tweeted about this, and I understand like there's a need to kind of spike the football after the win.
Sure.
The game went to overtime. It wasn't like a bad pick.
That's true.
A few things go the other direction. Alabama is playing for the national championship. So it was the wrong pick at the end of the day, but I don't think the logic was bad.
That game went off at Michigan -2.5. There was a world where you could have, Alabama could have covered, Michigan still could have won the game.
Yeah, and look, you're giving Saban a month, right? Most often when you're giving Saban a month, you're going to take Nick Saban.
Right.
Didn't work this time. It was his final game. We know that now. I was wrong on that front, but ultimately right on Michigan. The other ones I'll call out. And I want
you
guys.
Just didn't have the steely resolve.
I didn't have the steely resolve.
Yeah.
I didn't have, shut
the
up.
diamond hands.
Shut up. Let me get through the ones I got right. I have 4 more.
Hold on. Ty wants to keep patting himself on the back.
I want to keep patting. I want to give you guys a chance to do it as well.
Okay. Fair enough.
So I had Michigan as the national champion. I had Washington winning the Pac-12. I had Texas in the playoff.
Yeah.
I said that Colorado could be a feisty 3-9. In reality, they went 4-8. So
okay,
I'll take that one. And I got it right on the screws. I said Florida's going to finish 5-7. Maybe because of the schedule, but certainly not something to celebrate if you're a Florida fan. Andy, maybe we can talk a little bit about Florida Gators football.
Yeah.
But I had 5-7. So those are the things I was right about. I was right about, I feel, more than I was wrong about in looking back through preseason predictions. I actually think I did pretty well. But I want to give you guys an opportunity before we go through the misses to talk about some of the hits.
Okay. I had, let's see, if I'm looking across various conferences, I had Nebraska's defense having them sort of become interesting. I guess that counts. I had Mizzou's offense finally becoming interesting, and it won't, have Mizzou fans tearing their hair out of their brains. That came true. I was in on Kirby Moore early, so that I was happy with that one. I took Clemson. That was not great in the ACC. That was not my finest hour. But I had Michigan, I believe, winning the Big Ten. People can correct me if I'm wrong. I was close on a number of things, but it was not a great, correct year for me.
No.
Andy, what did you have that you feel good that you got correct and you saw coming?
Not a damn thing.
Nothing. Great. That's why there are
so
wrong
it was a terrible year for me.
Yeah.
I'm going back over it. Like, I had Penn State to win the Big Ten. Yeah, and I rode that out until the Ohio State game. Like, oh my God. I'm just watching the game, sitting there going, how could I be this wrong?
Yeah. I had Penn State in the
How
playoff.
can I fall for this?
Yep. I was not a believer in Texas the way that Ty was. No, there was very little that I feel like I did well in terms of picking.
I picked Oklahoma to beat Texas. I think that's probably about it.
That counts?
Did I do it that week? That's the problem. Did I do it that week? I can't even remember. But I picked it most of the preseason and going into the season. I think I did pick Oklahoma to win that game, but it was, that's probably it. Everything else, I was awful.
I remember we were super down on Northwestern after the Pat Fitzgerald stuff right before the season started. And then as the season approached, or maybe a game or two into the season, when it was kind of clear that the Big Ten was just going to be a morass of below average mediocrity, whatever, I was like, you know what? Why can't Northwestern at least win 4 or 5? And even then, I undershot Northwestern's season. But at least I was like, you know what? Why not?
Yeah.
Maybe there's something like galvanizing about the situation they were put in. So I was on to something, but definitely not to the degree that
I think I said Colorado was going to be 4-8 or 5-7.
Yeah, which is
You'll
reasonable.
take that. You'll take that.
Yeah.
They were also like 11 seconds away from being 2-10.
Yeah, but let's not quibble.
Yeah.
Let's not quibble. All right. So with that being said,
Yes.
I think the one that I was most wrong about was Neil Brown
Ooh.
at West Virginia, because you can go and you can pull quotes from me. I think I had about a dozen or so of them in the preseason. Even when we were doing West Virginia focused episodes back in the spring, I was all in on Neil Brown as the first coach to be fired. And in case you weren't paying attention, right now, my guy's over there in Morgantown, I think still washing the Duke's mayo out of his hair.
Yeah, coming off a 9-win season.
Maybe with the Dawn like they use for the baby ducks because he can't get that stuff out. Turnaround stories don't generally happen in year 5, Andy. But Neil Brown finished with 9 wins. They won the Duke's Mayo Bowl. They very much steered into what their strength was. And I recall pretty vividly because, again, we did some West Virginia-focused episodes. Some of the gripes out there on the message boards about Neil Brown, about West Virginia was, man, how many off seasons do we got to go saying we need to make changes? We need to change this. We need to change that. Like, how many times in a row is this guy going to do this? And this one worked. They steered into the rushing attack. They steered into a lot of what, they had success with from a personnel standpoint the previous season. It freaking worked. Neil Brown did not get fired. Neil Brown is back with a vengeance, and I was wrong. So I apologize to Neil Brown.
Yeah, see, I didn't say that Neil Brown was going to get fired. What I wanted was Neil Brown to just go out in a blaze of glory if he was going to go out. I called it the year of YOLO Neil Brown. And that's why I said, I told Penn State, worry, because you're dealing with YOLO Neil Brown. And sure enough, they played him tough. They didn't end up winning. And I was so impressed with Neil kind of getting back to who he was at Troy, where there is no, this is my offense. It's, I'm going to do what works. Right. I'm going to do what works in this particular matchup. And it was great. And I thought, I talked to him quite a bit before the season, the deal in Phoenix where the Big 12 coaches meet and everything. So I had a couple conversations with him there. And I got the sense that this guy's like, screw it. I'm tired of everybody telling me what's going to work. I know how this should work. And so it was really impressive. It was because I did a thing with Neil Brown and Troy in 2018, where basically I called their SID during spring practice. And I said, you guys are going to beat Nebraska this fall. I would like to embed with you when you do it. And that's my best prediction ever, by the way.
Yeah, of course. That was great.
There you go.
And so they let me. And so I got to watch how his program worked for a week. And I came away a huge believer in Neil Brown. So watching what happened at West Virginia over the first 4 years, a lot of it, I was not ready to pin to Neil Brown as a failure of Neil Brown. They had some situations where it kind of could have gone either way and it didn't quite break that the right way for them. He brings in Graham Harrell trying to say, okay, I'm going to be more of a CEO. He called the plays, figured out what worked. And by the way, whereas they got pillaged in the portal the last few years, it looks like they kept what they needed to keep. No, yeah. Zach Frazier's gone, best center in America, but he was going to the NFL anyway. So I'm very impressed, and I'm actually pretty high on West Virginia going to this season too.
Yeah, Jaheim White, one of the more promising young running backs in the sport, coupled with C.J. Donaldson. Yeah, they were pillaged, and to be fair to West Virginia, we're not talking about a team who looked crazy strong this year that emphatically proved everybody wrong, but they were one of those teams that we like to say, drafted behind the opportunity truck. And when the bottom half of the Big 12 looked as disappointing as it looked this year, Cincinnati, Baylor, injured quarterbacks, TCU, like Texas Tech, right? That they were good enough to take advantage, which is absolutely a skill. And good for West Virginia for getting to a bowl, for getting mayo on their hair. Absolute win of a season.
Can't get that stuff out, man. You can't get that stuff out. It just clings.
Which, by the way, couldn't be more disgusting to our roncologist Andy Staples that we're bringing mayonnaise on hair into the discussion.
Well, I'd rather it be in my hair than in my mouth.
That's fair.
Oh, okay. Let's use that as our segue to Dan Rubenstein.
Okay.
What do you got for us, Dan?
I was, first of all, in the way that Andy talked about picking against Georgia twice, I had Oregon beating Washington in Seattle.
Oh, man.
I predicted Oregon before the season. I said Oregon's going to lose in Seattle but win in Vegas. Oregon losing in Seattle, dramatically so. And then Oregon as like a 9.5 point favorite. Picking Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, the final Pac-12 game ever, at least for now. And having Washington once again almost blow a lead, but Oregon lose close once again. So I doubled up.
You doubled up.
And to much of the delight, much to the chagrin of my brain and Oregon friends of mine, but much to the delight of Washington friends, the Huskies took it twice. So a double mint gum for me.
Can I do a ricochet shot here on Jeff Schwartz, who provided us with great video content out at verballers.com the whole year through? This is only half of the story, Andy. Okay. The other part of this is our like internal Slack chat between Dan and I in the buildup to the second Oregon game, where he is sharing with me the texts that he gets from Jeff at like 6 a.m. because Jeff is all in on Oregon football.
Of course.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
And talking through Michael Penix and talking through how when there's pressure in his face, he's a different quarterback. And guys, Oregon is just better. They're just better in this spot. They're gonna.
I would
win this
take
game.
Oregon again today. Today.
So I flipped on that one because I had picked Oregon all season. I had thought Oregon's just better, and they'll show it because they should have kicked the field goal at the end of the first half. But otherwise, it was just just chance that they didn't get either of the other two fourth down conversions. As that line kept going up in Oregon's favor, I was like, nope, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Something's off because Washington keeps winning these games,
right?
And it's not an accident. And so as the line kept going up, I was like, okay, forget it. I picked Oregon. I'm not picking against Washington here. I'm not.
Yeah.
I was like, you're going to give me almost 10 points. I'm taking the Huskies.
Yeah, so Andy's our roncologist and Kalen DeBoer is our winternist, right?
Yes.
Winternal medicine.
Exactly.
That's the best I can do on short notice. I apologize.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, thank you.
Dan, I don't blame you, though. I don't blame you.
It was tough. And Oregon had beat up corners, and you can make excuses. I can make excuses. Washington was better prepared to win those games.
Well, and Jeff is very persuasive.
He is.
For those who have not talked offline with Jeff Schwartz, one, was a very good football player, understands the game really well, played in the pros for a long time. Like, so you're going to respect his opinion no matter what. You have to remember with Jeff, though, that he is an unabashed Oregon homer. Correct. He is not looking at this objectively, and that's why he got caught up in the wash there.
No, it's like, look at me. Do I look like I played on the offensive line? No, of course I'm going to listen to Jeff Schwartz when he has feedback for Dan on what he's seeing on tape. So it didn't work. Whatever. We all have these. Andy, your turn.
This is a great one. All right, so I sent Dan the visual aids here because the first screenshot I sent to Dan was a text of the picks that I had made on my show. So on the show, we make kind of anywhere between 10 and 15 picks, whether they're point spread picks, whether they're total picks. And this was week 3. And so we had made 12 picks. And so Jack Terry, who runs our social media, texts me the 12 picks I made. And he says, I'm making a graphic for Twitter and Instagram, but I need to narrow this list down to 8. Which 4 do you feel the worst about? And I write back, I feel good about them all. Just pull the 4 least important ones. And then he goes, do you call this anything like Andy's Locks or something? And so they end up calling it Andy's Locks. And they put out a graphic with 8 selections. So I will read to you the 8 selections that were on this graphic. Mind you, this is week 3. These are my picks. Mississippi State, plus 9.5 against LSU. Tennessee, minus 6.5 at Florida. Colorado, minus 22.5 against Colorado State. Kansas State, minus 4.5 at Missouri. Oh no, it's worse. Michigan State, plus 16.5 against Washington. Georgia, minus 27.5 against South Carolina.
Ooh.
We're not done yet. Alabama, minus 31.5 at USF.
Oh, man. Oh, man, you jinxed them.
Wait. One more. Western Michigan at Iowa, under 42.5. So that's the last one is the key.
Yeah.
One of the 2 weeks of the year where the Iowa total went over. I should have known it wouldn't be my week. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't remember exactly what happened in week 3, that is an 0-8 week right there. That is 0 for that entire graphic. Mississippi State was down 9.5 to LSU within about 30 seconds.
Uh-huh.
Malik Neighbors had like 300 receiving yards in the first half. Florida had beaten Tennessee by the end of the second quarter. Like, that game was not close after the second quarter. Colorado, by the way, we all stayed up till 2 a.m. Eastern time.
Remember?
Yep.
Because that game went to overtime.
Rams just running crosser after crosser after crosser. Yeah.
K-State, Missouri, I knew I had lost even when Eli Drinkwitz thought he had lost. Because they weren't covering 4.5. But I assumed Harrison Mevis was going to miss from 61. Nope. He made it.
Keep going.
So I was hoping for a dead cat bounce for Michigan State against Washington, because that's when Mel Tucker had just been fired. You know, Harlan Barnett gets the interim job. I'm like, Harlan Barnett's going to give him Hail Harry speech. They're coming out and they're going to give Washington again. No, they got destroyed in that game. Georgia, South Carolina. We learned a lot about Georgia that way. That was the week where they had the cameras in the locker room at halftime. Carson Beck's like winking at the camera because they're down. I think they were down 14-3 at halftime. They were not covering a 4-touchdown spread. And then that was the week that Nick Saban and Tommy Rees decided, oh, you think we can't do better than Jalen Milroe? Well, we'll show you we certainly can't. We're going to turn this game over to Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson, and you'll see why we have to start Jalen Milroe.
It was what happened was week 3 was the crosshairs of like a narrative week. Like that's when all of the narratives were born, and you were wrong about all of them. Like you were again, we use the term gumpy, and it's no pun with the Alabama thing, but like you were at the scene for all of these major narratives, but you couldn't get in, right?
I was at the intersection of them.
Right.
The light went haywire and I got run over is what happened.
Georgia's defense might be a little bit more mortal against the run. Iowa's just a disaster on offense. What else? Harrison Mevis has an absolute boot, and Mizzou is one of the feel-good stories of the season. Like, you are there. You are at all the shows.
Right.
You are showing people pictures of you at Woodstock.
By the way, Mizzou, Kansas State. When Brady Cook was introduced as the starting quarterback, the home crowd booed him.
They booed him, yeah.
Mizzou was not the feel-good story at that point. It became it after. And now let me point out, as I mentioned, there were the 12 picks in the show. 4 picks were removed from this. So here are the 4 picks that were removed. Penn State minus 14.5 against Illinois. West Virginia minus 1.5 against Pittsburgh.
Ooh.
Wisconsin minus 19.5 against Georgia Southern. North Carolina minus 4.5 against Minnesota. If you remember correctly, what happened that week? What was my record on those 4 picks?
4-0?
4-0.
4-0.
4-0. That's how it works.
Andy, we did a segment on this show called Ty versus the World, where I would give out we would give locks out throughout the course of our normal preview episode, but I would give out my official picks, the ones that I felt best about at the end of all of our preview episodes. And it was a rough go for me in the early part. Now, what the graphic you're referring to was very early on in the season, but at that point I had already taken on some serious water. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to Dan, well, at least Andy got them all wrong. It made me feel better about myself.
Yeah.
It didn't get much better until much later in the season for me on that segment, but I kind of held up that graphic throughout the course of the year. I didn't print it up and put it on the wall here in the studio, but I thought about it frequently. I thought about it frequently.
Ty taps it like the Notre Dame play like a champion today. Ty taps it walking in. Yeah.
Here's the thing about that. So if Jack had chosen differently, that could have been a 4-4 graphic as opposed to an 0-8 graphic.
Which is totally respectable, right?
Yeah. But I argue that 0-8 worked better because it was the first time we'd done the graphic. We didn't do it the first 2 weeks. 0-8 set an expectation, set the tone. And it's like everyone after that was, oh, this is the moron who went 0-8.
Right. Engagement,
and it got more traction.
It's
like
engagement.
1 million people saw that graphic.
It's all about engagement these days.
Change next year's graphic to stay away staples. And that's
I like it.
Then you're good. Then you're good to go, right? You lean in, you commit to the bit. And 0-8 is way more interesting than 4-4. Who
Absolutely.
cares? It's way more interesting. By the way, on that note, Ty, if I can just use it as a segue, I think we both agreed when we did our ACC preview, just because he mentioned Pitt, West Virginia. We're like, hey, zero chance Pitt loses 5 games or more.
Quote,
they always figure it out.
Quote,
right?
Quote, there aren't 5 losses on this schedule.
We were right.
You know what? I was right. There were 9 there. There were 9.
Yeah, if you ever wanted to know if you didn't play high-level football, and if you, and I don't intend this to come across as mean, but this is just science here. If you ever want to know what it would feel like to wake up and all of a sudden you're playing quarterback for Pitt, watch the West Virginia game. There were moments where we were all Phil Jurkovec.
Yeah.
We were all
that was painful.
Freaking out.
Yeah. The Pitt story, like I went back and I looked at the ACC stuff that I put out there. And the optimism was the schedule because at the start of the year, it didn't look like it was going to be too difficult. The optimism was, hey, Pat Narduzzi lost a lot along the line, but he figures it out, right? That's just what he does. Part of the optimism was Phil Jurkovec, who they basically went old yeller on Phil Jurkovec by like week 6.
Yeah.
And it just kind of all bottomed out and they went 3-9. And so Pitt was one of the ones that I had highlighted, actually, that I was going to do next. It's a perfect segue. I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm. It's, what do you have next, Ty?
Outside of that, okay, so I won't play the drum roll again. I had Pitt. I did want to give a shout out to the mysterious quote unquote radio guys in Utah that most of Twitter wrote to us about when we said, we're not really sure about Cam Rising. We weren't so wrong about that one, Dan.
I was right about that one. I was like,
you were right about
bad
that.
Happened to his knee. Why are we just penciling him in late August?
We just kind of like went with it, but we were skeptical. Yeah. What version of Cam Rising?
Can I give you a little background on that too?
Sure.
So I had a story written about Utah potentially going and getting a quarterback who'd been out for a year and was presumed retired. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen. But they did make inquiries.
They kicked tires.
So I knew the Cam Rising injury had to be far worse than, which is why I picked Florida, since we're talking about being wrong. Yep. Why I picked Florida to beat Utah in the season opener.
Yep.
Turns out you don't need Cam Rising to beat Florida.
I just remember when we did our Pac-12 preview, and we were skeptical about what version of Cam Rising we were going to get because of the injury, and like these things take time. It's not, science has advanced a long way, but you still can't regrow an ACL overnight.
Yeah, we had think it would be student assistant Cam Rising.
That's right. We had a whole bunch of Utah people like, listen, the radio guys in Utah are saying he's going to be ready, so just like be on alert. Well,
right.
We're on alert for 2024. Thank you very much. That one didn't pan out for those guys. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out for Cam Rising either. Let me call out specifically, because you mentioned Penn State, Andy, and because I'm a Penn Stater, Drew Aller.
Oh, yeah.
I was preaching at the Drew Aller altar since the moment he signed the dotted line on the letter of intent. In fairness, 2 interceptions through the regular season.
Yeah.
He was not a liability. He was not a disaster. He was kind of not good.
So
kind of not transcendent, right? We expected.
This is one of those, like, it's interesting because, like, seeing games in person sometimes clarifies things for you, and it's hard to explain. But watching Drew Aller on TV, it's like, okay, I'm not entirely sure why it's not connecting here, because, like, I go to the Iowa game, pouring down rain, he's making NFL throws into tight windows, and you're like, okay, this guy's gonna be awesome,
Right.
And I went to the Michigan game in person, and I went to the Michigan State game in person, 2 very different experiences for Penn State. And the Michigan game, you can see much more when you can see the whole field, and it's not just what you're seeing on TV. You can see where he kind of clutches for just that extra half second in a lot of situations where he's a little, and this is probably why he didn't throw many interceptions, because he's very turnover averse. But where against the Ohio States and the Michigans, you got to let that rip sometimes. And then against Michigan State, when the receivers are so galactically open that it doesn't matter. I mean, he's like a jugs machine at that point.
Right.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, like, I don't know, mental exercise with this guy, because you can see the talent. You can see that he can throw the ball out of the stadium. But also, there are these moments where he just doesn't let it rip. He doesn't step into throws. It was a lot of underneath stuff. Part of it was not having receivers, but part of it was also not seeing receivers when they were open. My sense is there was some weird tension there with Yurcich as well, but there were accuracy issues. It just, you didn't come away a whole lot after watching Drew Aller and with this feeling of, wow, he was awesome. And so it just felt like there was a lot of potential that we didn't see, that I expected, that I predicted, that I was wrong about, that I hope I see in 2024 with the new offensive system. But we'll definitely pump the brakes a little bit more when we do our previews this time around.
Andy,
well, I'm still probably going to be all in on them, because Andy Kotelnicki, their new OC who came from Kansas, is like the most fun mad scientist offensive coordinator ever. Like, go watch all the stuff he drew up for the Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean in at the same time plays.
Yep. Yeah, does Penn State have receivers? That's the only thing to me right now.
Julian Fleming has a hell of a car commercial.
He does have a car commercial. Everybody likes Julian Fleming. I don't know if Ohio State fans were forever fans of his hands, but talent's obvious. Okay, so this was it might have been on our hot takes episode. So it's not a full, like, genuine, I've put a lot of thought into this, but it was a take I came up with that USC's defense wouldn't be good, wouldn't be great, wouldn't be the comeback story of the season, but that they'd be fine. That adding Bear Alexander and Anthony Lucas shores up a defensive line that might be able to cover. First of all, Bear Alexander, good. Bear Alexander, very good for you.
He did fine, yeah.
But it was sort of Bear Alexander and, like, his merry misfits, right? And USC's defense, we had Ari on last week. He was at the USC game against, I think, Washington. He was like, that was the single, like, most disturbing, disappointing defensive effort he had seen in person. And he's not wrong.
Well, only because it reminds him of the check he's going to have to write to me after this coming season.
He did reference this. He did reference the check, Andy.
And USC's defense took no steps forward. They continued to be terrible. And there were, like, I think USC fans early on pointing to, like, some pass rushing numbers against San Jose State or something. I was like, guys, it's not going to happen. And it didn't. It didn't happen for USC. Was absolutely wrong that this defense would be okay. Merely disappointing. No, it was once again terrible. And I was wrong.
Yep. And now they steal UCLA's defensive coordinator.
Yep. Danton Lynn, Eric Henderson from the Rams. Yep. So perhaps that changes something. I'm not sure it will, unless Lincoln Riley is open to philosophical changes. I just don't. I can tell by watching that they are a team that does not take tackling seriously at practice. Right.
Like, when you watch Georgia play, when you watch Michigan play, like, these are teams that hit at practice. These are teams that deep into the season, still have at least 1 or 2 days a week where they are really hitting at practice. USC does not look like one of those teams.
No, they don't hit at practice. They don't hit at games. They might not tackle when they're playing Madden. You don't see it from USC at all. So to me, it's more just like, I don't think they have guys. I don't think they recruit like they want to be good at defense. I just don't think they have the guys to play good defense.
Well, and that is also true. And if you go back to Lincoln Riley's recruiting history, even at Oklahoma, they just don't sign top 100 defensive guys for the most part. They need to start doing that, or they will never have the kind of defense they actually want.
Were you high on a specific unit, a specific player, a specific coach heading into the season where you were positive that you were going to be proven right and were comically wrong?
Well, that would be the Penn State offense for me.
Okay,
that
Penn
was
State offense.
Yeah, because that was the one I was like, okay, the light's gonna come on, it's gonna click. The Iowa game for me was like, that was the fool's gold.
Right.
You know what? They scored 31 points in the rain against Iowa. Like, they're going to be fine. And then the Ohio State game happens, and they're like, what? Just try something.
Yeah.
And
it was bad.
And they wouldn't.
Ty, what do you have?
Let me call out Kentucky. I was really in on Kentucky.
You were in
year.
the cone zone. Yeah.
I pulled a quote out here. You could argue that Liam Cohen's system was the reason for all this ridiculous hype around Will Levis. So I love the fact that he's back with another solid quarterback, and I am delirious for Devin Leary.
Yeah.
End quote.
Good line. Very good line.
I thought so.
Stand by the line.
I stand by the line.
Content.
But, I don't know if it was as bad as some of the stats might indicate for Devin Leary. Because I remember we did a deep dive of like some of the advanced stuff, Dan, for one of the Patreon episodes. And it was like, all right, like we can kind of see what they're doing here. And it just didn't take flight the way I expected.
Well, Kentucky offense and USC defense, I feel like, are analogous. It's the head coach's overarching philosophy that puts them where they are. And Liam Cohen just left Kentucky to go be the Tampa Bay Bucks offensive coordinator. So they've got to find a new OC. I don't think if you're a candidate for that job that you go into it thinking you're going to have no handcuffs on you. Mark Stoops wants a certain tempo. He wants a certain vibe from his offense. Don't mess it up for my defense kind of thing. And, if you can maul people up front, run the ball, like the Kentucky-Florida game is a great example. Like that is the dream of Mark Stoops. Like he wants every game to be like that. But they're not good enough on the offensive line to do that to everybody that they play. And, unfortunately, like the very tragic passing of John Schlarman, their offensive line coach a few years ago, it's not the same anymore. And so unless they can get their line back up to the level that it was a few years ago, you're just not going to dominate on the ground. You are going to have to learn to adapt a little bit. You're going to have to play with tempo a little bit just to keep people off balance. Because Kentucky has recruited some good players and some good athletes, and they've got a couple of young receivers, Dane Key and Barryon Brown, I believe, who are really good. The question is like with Brock Vandegrift, the quarterback they have coming in from Georgia, do you cut that loose a little bit? Do you try to juice the tempo every once in a while, open things up, or are you going to be overwhelmingly conservative offensively? And if you are, this is just what you're going to get. And Mark Stoops, I think, has told us who he is enough times that we should just believe him.
There's also the element of, and it's never just one player, but I always enjoy looking at programs who are successful, and then when a key player leaves, you're like, oh, in retrospect, that guy was way better than we even appreciated. Maybe that's Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Maybe you have a guy that is so good that perhaps certain deficiencies are covered up for, or he is that safety valve because Will Levis has a season both, I think, with and without Wan'Dale Robinson as well. And you could see some differences there. And that's Liam Cohen and not Liam Cohen.
Rich Scangarello.
Yes.
Right.
And so there are those guys across the sport where you're like, oh man, in retrospect, this dude. And I remember thinking about that, about Allen Robinson, Like he always had these like kind of disappointing quarterbacks, but always would put up 1,300 yards receiving, both in the NFL and in college. You're like, oh, in retrospect, this guy's just so good that he was able to cover up. Yeah,
I've gone 2 straight years now of trying to speak Tavion Robinson into Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah.
Into existence.
As they have. I mean, that was the point when they went and got him. They thought, okay, this is physically, and skill set wise, very similar to what we had in Wan'Dale, but it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. I mean, Wan'Dale's playing in the pros. So, all right. What do you got, Dan?
I was super high on Texas Tech heading into the year. Like Joey McGuire captures me. And so I was just in on that offense taking a step forward and generating more explosive plays. What I didn't account for was the Tyler Shuck factor. He has bad luck. He just has bad luck. He keeps getting injured.
Can I throw a Tyler Shuck observation in?
Please.
Is Tyler Shuck the new Michael Penix Jr.?
Oh my God. Tyler Shuck at Louisville. Finally with
Tyler Shuck at Louisville. Last chance with a guy who makes quarterbacks look great.
Making an early play for this award in 2025, Andy.
Yeah.
Yes,
How many
exactly
NFL
right.
Receivers does Tyler Shuck have at Louisville in 2024? I have no idea.
Not Jamari Thrash, but they did get some guys out of the portal who could be very good. So
yeah, I just have Tyler Shuck baggage watching him at Oregon, and he would look really good for a week and then panic at the end of games, and the bad luck with injuries at Texas Tech, and like the Texas Tech defense continues to improve. They hired well on the defensive side of the ball. They've been active in the portal on the defensive side of the ball. They basically were a pick 6 away from beating Oregon at home and a huge win, but just couldn't sustain. They became a running team. They realized they had to just give the ball to Taj Brooks as much as humanly possible. And that was smart, but it wasn't winning them a ton of games this year. And so I thought we were talking about like an 8.
Well, remember Andrew Peasley put the stake in him early. Yeah, Andrew Peasley, the very fun quarterback for Wyoming. And look, you don't go up to Laramie and just roll your helmets out there and win a game.
Right.
I'm inventing it.
I'm a big altitude guy too, and I screwed that up. Yeah.
I'm putting together a take board that we're going to put somewhere here in the studio, and I'm going to jot that one.
So is my Tyler Shuck take gonna lead it off for 2024?
Stay away, Staples.
If you'll give me some permission to use that on my take board, we can include it as one of our first 100%. Editions. All right.
Because I just look at it as a guy with a lot of physical talent who's had very bad luck, which is what Penix was at Indiana.
And he's also, 28? Like, he's been around for a minute, like Michael Penix. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because Tyler Shuck was signed the year before Ty Thompson signed at Oregon, right?
Wow.
Yep. And Ty Thompson just left Oregon after, 3 years? So this is, it is... I'm hopeful for that. The Joey McGuire thing is interesting to me because I wondered, is this a case where everybody's just getting excited because this is a likable coach who gives good quotes and good interviews? I don't think that's necessarily the case entirely, because if you look at them at the end of this season, they were figuring some stuff out.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a chance that they wind up being a pretty good program as the years go on. They just needed to figure out what they are and how to best it. And credit to them, because like Zach Kittley's a pure air raid guy, but they realized run the ball, play defense might be the way we have to win. And so when coaches can understand that and kind of put egos aside and just say, you know what, we're going to do what it takes to win, I think that's an encouraging sign.
And we're recording this on signing day, by the way. I think they signed either the best or the second best receiver in Texas, like a 5-star receiver.
Yeah.
Like he's resonating on the trail. It counts.
Yep. It does. And so I have another one that also is in the Lone Star State, where I was just kind of super down on Texas going into the season. I thought they were going to win quite a few games, but I just assumed they would continue to lose a couple of games that they shouldn't lose, that would just crop up again. And they didn't. They lost to Oklahoma in a very tight game, and they kept it together the rest of this. Like the K-State game was one the old Texas would have easily lost.
Yeah, they had at least 3 games the old Texas would have lost. Definitely.
Yeah. And so I'm super impressed with Sark and what they've done and the way they've developed play. Like they've got a bunch of guys that are going to get drafted now. They've got a bunch of younger guys who are going to get drafted in a year or two. Like that is they are building for what should be a year in, year out successful program. And I guess I was so jaded by the end of the Mac Brown era, the Charlie Strong years, the Tom Herman years. I just assumed they were going to be same old, and I was wrong. And, it was part of it was not having a ton of faith in Quinn Ewers. It's the same reason I picked Washington to beat Texas in the Sugar Bowl. I actually think that problem solves itself anyway. Either Quinn Ewers is going to be good or Arch Manning is going to be the guy.
Right.
So, I will probably wind up being very high on Texas going into this season because it feels like they have proven me wrong on all the things I was doubting them about.
Yeah, I also don't have Texas's schedule in front of me, but the amount of change, the pure change or the pure vulnerability in the SEC, if you're a team as talented as Texas, makes the Horns super interesting this year. So I think you're right. Ty, what do you have?
I was, I have this quote. More quotes.
Yeah.
Which is always fun. Quote, I'm heavy on Miami.
You brought the receipts. You brought your own receipts. Yeah.
Quote, they're too talented to fail like they did last season.
Uh-huh.
Oh, boy.
End quote. Ended up 7-6 with the bowl loss to Rutgers. Talked a lot
your
about
week 2 was
Rutgers.
great, right? Your week 2 with the win over Texas A&M, you were probably chest puffing. Yeah.
I was feeling myself. But 7-6, lost the bowl to Rutgers. We talked more about Rutgers last episode than we did Miami. And now here we stand coming into year 3, the Mario Cristobal era, Andy, Dan, where they got Cam Ward. We're excited about that. I think the recruiting progress, maybe. I'm trying to talk nicely about Miami football. Again, I don't know why.
Cam Ward makes for a great Twitter highlight.
Great
he
Twitter
really
highlight.
does.
So
maybe the rest of the experience.
The recruiting under Cristobal remains strong. They're obviously out there in the portal. It seems like he's kicked up a fair amount of dust. Now it is really just a matter of putting the pieces in place and translating that to wins.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to make this mistake
when
again.
you can take a knee, let me purely theoretical here, but if they take a knee against Georgia Tech, how different is their season?
It's true.
I think that had a lot to do with everything.
There was definitely a momentum swing, right?
So the problem is, and again, I consider myself a bit of a Mario Cristobal expert after the years I watched him. The problem is overtime against Virginia, right? The problem is Miami just never looks like, they were just 17 points better than this average team. They play up to and down to everybody. And so it's a competitive game against Florida State, a team that arguably should have been in the playoff and came down to it. And you can defend it from a Florida State perspective that Miami always gets up for these games, but you're getting up to and down to with Mario Cristobal teams. And so that's still the issue that in terms of pure talent, in terms of pure potential, Miami should be 10 to 13 points better than Georgia Tech. They just should be. And it's up to and down to every week.
Yeah.
So that's the difficulty if you're a Ty Hildenbrandt type and saying they're too talented to do this.
Type, thank you.
Almost doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter how talented they are. It just matters how talented the other team is.
Right.
Because that's who they're going to play like.
Yep.
Dan, what do you got?
I had Vanderbilt in a bowl game, everybody, after a nice 2022 that saw them beat, Florida and Kentucky. Yeah. I was like, Clark Lee and these doors have turned a corner. They're learning how to lose close, win close, whatever. They're going to continue to grow. Spoiler alert, they did not.
Nah.
They just, and they're one of those programs that's just going to be a big NIL and portal victim program that if they develop somebody like Ray Davis, he's like, well, what can I do with this new cachet that I have? And it was go to Kentucky and look strong for a month. And so that's going to be the difficulty. Now we enter into the Jerry Kill, Diego Pavia era, and I'm going to talk myself into the doors. That's just what I'm going to do. But no, that was in retrospect pretty indefensible.
I do love that Diego Pavia is now. I'm sorry about that.
You're good.
Hold on. I do love that Diego Pavia is now the quarterback at Vanderbilt University.
Beautiful.
The man who got in trouble for taking a leak on the New Mexico indoor football facility logo as tribute to the rivalry between New Mexico State and New Mexico is now Vanderbilt University starting quarterback. I
Doors
love
need that fire, Andy.
They need that.
Love
And didn't he had his helmet twisted around on his head very early on in the
that
season.
too.
Yep.
That,
Which was
that
also a
also
highlight.
happened. So excited. So excited. But
Jerry Kill is arguably the closest thing this sport has, or one of the closest things this sport has to like a chopped master champion. Give him whatever
Yes.
ingredients. He's going to pull out a flambe in some kind of fashion. and
what
he's gonna do it.
tattoo does he get if Vandy makes a bowl in 2024?
Oh, the anchor tramp stamp is probably the move.
Absolutely.
The anchor is down. sir.
Anchor down, baby.
Yeah.
Andy, what do you got
answer.
here? You got any other ones?
Yeah, I'll give you a good one. I was convinced Clemson was back.
Oh, yeah.
That because Lincoln Riley made the difficult decision to fire Brandon Streeter and then hires Garrett Riley, I was thinking, okay, he is understanding that he's gotten too insular. He needs to go outside, bring in fresh blood. You know, you think about the hiring of Chad Morris, the hiring of Brent Venables. Those were the things that really launched Clemson into its dominant era. And I thought, okay, that this is a willingness to show, hey, we've gotten a little too insular here. We have to do something different. We have to think outside the box. And they look like the same old thing. Yeah. And now, I've had Ari in my ear for 2 years saying Clemson's not coming back to what it was because Dabo's not willing to adapt. And I was like, no, this is the willingness to adapt. It wasn't enough. Like,
right.
you got to start doing what everybody else is doing. You have to use the transfer portal. You can't just have glaring holes in your roster and expect to beat the teams you're supposed to beat without filling them. And I always go back to the Florida State game this year. And look, I'm not saying Clemson would have gotten Keon Coleman had they tried to get him when he came out of the portal, but just theoretically, if you put Keon Coleman on Clemson in that game, Clemson wins that game and wins the ACC.
Yeah, likely. Man, the Clemson thing is tough because you really have to start looking at them in a vacuum and not like, well, in 2018, like, no, that doesn't exist.
No, because they don't play by the same rules as everybody else anymore.
Right.
And I'm not saying that they're an outlaw program. I'm saying that they're the ones that just refuse to change. And like, you see how quickly all these other programs, and not elite programs, but these other programs can fill the holes in their roster, can paper over some things that would have been a problem in the old
especially
system.
At receiver, where like they have this reputation. Dabo's goes back to his time as a receivers coach, and you see like the year over year, Ray McLeod, Justin Ross, T. Higgins, all these dudes, and receivers like the position that you can immediately get so much better at through the
Yes.
There's a case to be made that the moment Clemson stopped having those receivers who could go up and win 50-50 balls, that's the moment when it started to go a little bit downhill, just a little bit downhill, right? Because they have not gone out there. They have not found those guys. There's also a case to be made that just like philosophically, I know we focus in on the transfer portal and not filling those roster gaps and what have you, but like he went out there. I remember when he made the offensive coordinator move, Garrett Riley, like this is, I heard it too, Andy. This is Dabo being cold-blooded, being exacting. Right. Dude, he is showing that killer instinct. The offense kind of looked the same.
There wasn't exactly the same.
There wasn't a whole lot of adaptation regardless of who was running it. And so it's like whatever we make of the transfer portal and Dabo's relationship with it and NIL and all that stuff, those are going to get the headlines. But philosophically, there has been an unwillingness to change just across the board that I think we are seeing, especially so now without like a game breaker at quarterback, a game breaker at wide receiver. Like it's becoming more evident now.
And the defense hasn't even gotten that much worse.
Right.
No,
it's stayed pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the hires they made this year. So Matt Luke coaching the offensive line, Chris Rump coaching the defensive line. Those guys are great.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it matters now.
You need guys, and you need to be willing. Yeah.
All right. Notre Dame and Jared Parker and Sam Hartman. Should I do the thing?
I tried to tell you, Ty.
Yeah.
If you're a major school hiring a coordinator and nobody is trying to hire that coordinator, not a great sign.
I remember when they hired when they made it official about Jared Parker, after everybody got done writing the news stories about he's got this relationship with Marcus Freeman. They used to carpool to work together at Purdue. After all of that had kind of cleared,
Yeah.
I remember like just sort of asking around people like, hey, does this, what's this going to look like on offense now? And the overwhelming sentiment was it should look mostly the same. It should look mostly the same as last year. They're not going to do anything crazy. It's just going to look a lot of the same, and they're going to be fine. They got Sam Hartman coming in. Receiver was always going to be an issue. That's not a surprise to anybody, but it just seemed as if it's going to be plug and play with Hartman. They're going to do a lot of the same stuff, and the offense is going to be fine. It's going to work. Just trust us. It's going to be good. It didn't really.
You lost to the team we just trashed.
Yeah,
badly.
Yeah,
badly
by stock.
Fashion. Yeah,
badly. And so, however, somebody's going to need to do a 30 for 30 or a podcast limited run series on how they got Troy to take Jared Parker. But the Jared Parker experience was not pleasant and definitely frustrating for those of us who watch every Notre Dame snap and cheer on Notre Dame football. Like the Sam Hartman thing, I think I talked to you, Dan, about this. Like if you prorate his performance against Drew Pines, it wasn't all that better. And like, it just didn't work the way it was supposed to. I'm not here to dunk on Marcus Freeman or Sam Hartman or Jared Parker, but I was wrong about that. I just assumed it would be a lot better than it was.
I think we needed to pour cold water on you after like the NC State game. You were so excited.
You kidding me?
Well, I mean, let's remember he wasn't the first choice. I mean, the whole Andy Ludwig thing happened. Like that wasn't a fever dream. Like that was Andy Ludwig at a basketball game, and then it's like, oh crap, we didn't know what the buyout was, and they didn't just pay the buyout.
They didn't just pay the buyout. They ended up with Parker. It sort of felt like they wanted to hire Parker from the beginning, but had to at least look elsewhere first to see what kind of interest there was in that position.
Yeah, there were Colin Klein rumors, I remember. Yeah.
I just assumed that it would be better than it was, and I feel like the moment during the season when we all realized that it wasn't really that much better, it was just more a function of their schedule to that point.
Yeah.
At that point, it was too late for me. It was like, well, I'm dead wrong on this one.
Was that the Louisville game? Was that when it dawned on you?
The Duke game.
The Duke game
was tough.
The Duke game was tough.
I've got an offensive one that I was so sure of and so excited. Like you probably needed pour cold water on me. I was positive Joe Milton was going to be an assassin in that system for Tennessee. Especially after the bowl game against Clemson, I was like,
well, I was on the Joe Milton hype train after the Orange Bowl too. Yeah. I was with you there.
We all focused a little too much on his familiarity with the Tennessee system.
Yeah. And well, it's just giant arm in a system that loves a giant arm.
Everybody loves giant arms.
It wasn't even the familiarity with the system. It was, I watched him make a couple throws in the Orange Bowl. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'd watched the Vanderbilt game closely the week before, I would have been completely turned off. But I watched a couple tight window throws in the Orange Bowl that were so different than what I was used to seeing from Joe Milton when he played in games. And he just looked more accurate. And that game was the ultimate fool's gold. It was, if you could play every game like this, you're going to be awesome. But he hadn't played every game like that in the games that he'd started in the past. And he didn't play every game like that. And so you got the Joe Milton experience that the people in Michigan saw, and you got the Joe Milton experience that they saw early on at Tennessee that caused them to switch to Hendon Hooker. And yeah, Tennessee
ended up as like a rushing team. They became like, they're like, we need to just run it way more because these dudes seem to be more promising.
Well, the other thing with Joe that I don't think I realized and I don't think people appreciated, Joe was not a great read option guy.
No.
Like he did not. And I've asked quarterbacks about this because I don't understand, like, how do you learn to know when to pull the ball and when to let the back take it? I feel like that should be very complicated. And when you ask quarterbacks who are good at it, they're like, I don't know why I know that. I just know that. And It is very instinctual. And so Joe did not have the instincts that Hendon had for that, or that a lot of the quarterbacks who are really good at that have. Nico seems to have that. So like right there, Tennessee's offense, like if you want to buy stock in something, you would expect Tennessee's offense to improve just based on that.
The feel. Yeah, I agree. I thought Graham Mertz was going to be a disaster at Florida. fully in the like.
He turned out
fine.
fine. Yeah,
totally fine in like the Danny Etling zone of like, hey, this guy's fine.
Great dude, by the way, and he's KC guy. Very proud of his KC barbecue.
Oh, okay.
Very proud. Staunch defender of the KC barbecue joints.
Loves those sticky ribs.
His iPhone camera roll, very similar to mine.
Good.
Lots of pictures of barbecue in it.
There you
Great.
go. Andy, we got time for one more from you.
From me or from Andy?
Andy.
Okay. I have a few, but I'll just rattle them off. I don't care.
Well, actually, Dan, you start rattling. I gotta find it because I was wrong on so much. It's hard to identify each individual thing.
That's fair.
So you go ahead.
I thought to myself, Harold Perkins, Mason Smith, big time transfers in the defensive backfield. LSU's defense can't miss, baby. They missed. They definitely missed this year. I have sleeper dangerous Wazoo on here in the Pac-12. 2-7 in the conference. Not sleeper, not dangerous.
I remember that.
Threw for a bunch of yards in Eugene. I remember that. We had like nothing on Liberty. Liberty ended up representing the G5 in the New Year's Six Bowls. And so they rode an advantageous schedule, but a really fun offense with Jamie Chadwell. They won a bunch of games. They won Conference USA, and they're your G5 rep. Just that was being wrong by ignoring.
I have a quote from you if you want to hear that.
Please.
Quote, the Iowa offense can't possibly get any worse. End quote.
I did say that. Yeah. And I thought, what did I call it? We called it the Ferentz fluff up, that they would just like run a train on Utah State to inflate the average to get, nope.
I'm sorry. All these sexual references to Iowa's offense just do not compute with me.
So I was wrong. I was wrong on Iowa's offense not being able to. Well, also, I saw like Eric All, Cade McNamara, and I think both of those guys got hurt pretty early on, right?
That's right. That did not help.
I'll go close to home. I predicted my alma mater would be 7-5, and they wound up 5-7. Florida. The reason I said 7-5 is I expected an increase in basic competency by Florida. And you saw, some sloppiness, mistakes in that first season. And I was quickly disabused of this game one, when Florida's like trotting out 10 guys on the field for certain things. Guys are wearing the same number on the field at the same time. Like, they just started sloppy and stayed sloppy. They had multiple situations throughout the year where they would put 10 guys out on the field goal block team. Like, the core competency never got better. And let's put it this way. I'm not expecting an improvement in that department because I don't see, based on even though they've made some staff changes, I don't see enough to suggest that the overarching problem is going to be fixed.
But the big question now is, where's DJ Lagway going to transfer to?
Now stop it, Dan. Let these people have their hope for a few months.
Know. Get their hopium. Yeah.
I was dead to rights on Oklahoma State before the season. I had them dead to rights.
Oh, yeah.
How can you be dead to rights on Oklahoma State? This is a team that got blown out by South Alabama and then suddenly was one of the best teams in the Big 12.
I have had this flip-flopping relationship with Oklahoma State all season long. For the last 3 years, frankly. Before the season, I had, quote, if everything pops and Oklahoma State hits the over and wins 8 or 9 games, then ... So I was like, I'm going to give myself partial credit for Oklahoma State. Because before the season, I was really down on them. After the bye week, when they beat, I think, Kansas State, I was picking...
On a Friday night, yep.
Yeah, on a Friday night. I was picking Oklahoma State every week. And I think I did so all the way up until maybe the Big 12 championship game, right? I was in on Oklahoma State from that point forward. I'm not wrong, though, and I'm going to come back to this time and again. I'm not wrong about the long-term prospects of the program. I'm not wrong because they're not recruiting. In the new look, 16-team Big 12 now, they finished 10th in recruiting. I don't think the infrastructure is there to sustain it unless they keep hitting on guys in the portal, if they even use the portal. So I am still very bearish on Oklahoma State long-term, but I need to call myself out because I was really down on this program. They ended up winning 10 games and made it to the Big 12 title.
I was out on Mike Gundy, and now I think I'm back in.
Yeah.
Because he was one I was sure was not going to adapt and was going to just let it all fall apart. He's adapting.
He's adapting a little bit, yeah.
Did you notice what his transfer portal philosophy was for his own team.
Yep.
During the bowl season. Like, oh, you want to enter the portal? Okay, that's cool. Just make it a practice.
And his own son transferred out. He got rid of his own son.
Right. So I am actually now kind of turning the corner on Gundy because like I never doubted Mike Gundy as an on-field coach. Still don't. But I was not sure what was going to happen in terms of program management with all these changes because he didn't seem to be willing to adapt. I do think he's probably being more adaptable than we're giving him credit for. So I am now back open to the possibility of Oklahoma State being successful in the new Big 12.
Okay. The only other one I have here, Dan, is I was all in on Kansas State over 8.5.
Yeah.
And my quote was, I think they've got one of the 3 easiest schedules in the conference. They might have the best coach in the conference. I sung the praises of the Wildcats. Meanwhile, sort of panned the losses of Deuce Vaughn and Malik Knowles.
I would say he's like a great, in retrospect, Deuce Vaughn was even better than we gave him credit for.
But so here's the thing about them guys. Like, you're talking about a very tight situation at Missouri.
Yeah.
Where they easily could have won that game and probably should have beaten Texas.
Yeah.
So I don't think you were that far off, Ty.
I wasn't far. I mean, they won 8 games. So it wasn't, or won 8 games in the regular season. So I wasn't that far off.
Yeah.
But I was so sure on K-State. I think that's why I'm saying I was wrong. It's a little bit like the Oklahoma State thing where I know what I said at the start of the year, and I know like I wasn't that far off base, but to my core, in my marrow, I did not believe in Oklahoma State. To my core, in my marrow, I thought K-State could win 10 games and, you know, definitely overlooked the fact that they had lost 2 of their most key contributors.
To pile on, though, to Ty's wrongness, do you know how hard it is to give up 42 points to Iowa State in the snow?
I know.
Difficult.
That game made no sense.
No, I know.
No sense whatsoever. But let me ask you guys.
Yeah.
Because I am all in on Avery Johnson.
I mean,
so
he's
is
really,
Dan.
I am all in. Like, I'm picking K-State. It's either K-State or Utah for me to win the league this year.
There you go.
Let's go Hawk Harrelson twice here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We're just preparing for my. See, this is good. I'll be more prepped when you bring me back next year as the wrongcologist.
Oh my God. I was all in on
Tyler Shook, Avery Johnson.
Yeah. Avery Johnson was so fun in limited opportunity this year in like package situations, and then has work to do, I think, as a passer, but that's the bowl game, and I don't fully take bowl results and situations terribly seriously anymore. But the best of Avery Johnson, I am ready to be heard again, Ty.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm ready to be heard again. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
That's a lot of wrongness for one episode, Ty.
I was going to say, I think we've definitely confessed to our sins here.
Yeah.
On the episode. It is an occupational hazard, but it is required in the shadow of the season to at least reflect a little bit on what we were right about, what we were, in this case, wrong about.
Do you know how many puns I came up with? How many puns I came up with for this episode, Ty?
You came up with a lot.
I came up with no. I haven't even touched the surface. I came up with college football wrong puns. Like, I was prepared to call you DeRong Payne for your Alabama pick over Michigan. I was ready to, wrong Bellamy, wrong Ebell for Michigan picks. I was fully, and I just said, you know what? That's a little much to try to squeeze into each wrong element. So I opted out. But
I was going to say, when you asked the question, do you know how many puns I came up with? I was going to be like 2. Wrongologists and Winternists. Apparently there's a list of like
there's
40.
A whole list of like I was considering wrong Burgundy for your Alabama pick. I was ready for a lot. And I was like, you know what? This is Dan just smashing too much into the episode. And I pulled back, Ty.
The cutting room floor here. Yeah. I feel guilty. I didn't even mention Andy Staples' show. Andy Staples on 3. You're doing a marvelous job.
Thank you for the plug.
Grinding even in the off season. What has the off season been, the quote unquote off season been like for you? Have you had a chance to recalibrate and catch your breath a little bit?
Non-existent, because we were going to do a show just like this.
Yeah.
And we've never even gotten around to it because some new stuff happens pretty much every day. Like you had the transfer portal going crazy. Now you have all the legal stuff, which it's hard for me because I know that the audience does not necessarily care about that stuff. But the stuff that's going on now is so big. I'm like, guys, you're going to want to care here because it will affect what things look like in the future. Like this Tennessee and Virginia versus the NCAA case, like that's a big deal. And so it's one of those things where like, we're having a law professor on. Well, that's the show. But there has been no discernible offseason. And I'm looking at it like I'm texting with sports information directors saying, hey, can we get your coach on? Can we get some players on? And they're like, all right, well, we'll be starting spring practice in 2 weeks. So yeah, let's get going.
It's amazing. Yep.
Andy Staples, always a pleasure to have you. Dr. Andrew Staples, forgive me. Yes. Pleasure to have you on.
The oncologist.
A oncologist of your stature is hard to come by. I know you're very busy, so thank you for contributing to our show here. Don't forget, one and all, make sure you hit subscribe or follow wherever it is you get your podcasts. And, of course, check us out on Patreon at verballers.com. Dan Rubenstein, I think that's all we got for this episode.
That's all I have.
For that guy over there, Dan, for myself, Ty, for our guest of honor, Dr. Andy Staples, we will talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.